Recording in progress.
Well, good evening, everybody. This is a work session of the Greenbelt City Council. My name is Emmett Jordan. I'm the mayor of City of Greenbelt. My colleagues, would you introduce yourselves, please?
Kristen Weaver, Mayor Pro Tem.
Jenny Pompey, council member.
Silky Pope, council member.
Danielle McKinney, council member.
Amy Niesel, council member.
Okay. Any information or discussion items, council, for the end of the meeting? Ms. Pompey's got one.
Got two.
Got two. Okay. I saw for the city manager may have one. So quickly, we hold work sessions on Mondays and Wednesdays several times a month to exchange information with community stakeholder groups or to gather information from staff, advisory boards, or residents. No votes or formal actions are taken at work sessions. These work sessions and our council meetings are open to the public except for executive sessions as authorized by state law so that residents and others can observe council's deliberations. We do strive to provide reasonable opportunities for the public to voice opinions on matters being considered, and we'll pause periodically for public comment, probably every 15 minutes or so, if that's council's will. So during these times, if a member of the public wishes to address council or the city administration or ask a question, if you raise your hand and you're in the room after being recognized, we'll invite you up to the podium. You need to state your name and where you live, more or less, in the city of Greenbelt. If you are on the Zoom call, you can use the Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen to submit a question, or you can raise your virtual hand. And once again, after being recognized, we'll promote you so that you can speak. And if you are watching on cable TV, you can send an email to us at questions@greenbeltmd.gov. We ask that you are three minutes or so to speak on one topic, just one topic at a time related to questions under consideration. We ask that you avoid questioning the motives of others. And just in general, we're all neighbors, so please try and be civil in your remarks. Tonight we're actually having a discussion on a project that has been worked on for a number of years. We're talking about the Buddy Attick Lake Park Master Plan. And these are modifications to the master plan that was actually put together. I was looking back at this. The original master plan actually was submitted and approved back, a long time ago, in 1992. And Gil Weidenfeld was the mayor at that time, and a couple of familiar names on the PRAB Parks and Recreation Advisory Board. And the director of planning was Celia Wilson, later to be Celia Craze. So, certainly Buddy Attick Park, the lake and the park itself, are one of the crown jewels in the city of Greenbelt's collection assortment of lakes and recreation areas. So we're council and the public is very, very conscientious about the future, planning for the future, and being able to do the things that are most needed so that the park thrives, is sustainable, thrives, and meets the needs of the public going forward. So we've been joined by our city manager, Josue Samaron. How are you, Mr. Samaron?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Mayor?
Oh, fantastic, fantastic. And we've got Greg Varda, who's the director of the Recreation Department. We've got a number of members of our Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, as well as the contractors, the consultants that have been working on this project. So let's see, I can cue this up a little bit more if you like. Greg? Hey, could you go ahead and introduce the members of the PRAB and everybody else is here?
Happy to do so, Mayor. Thanks for having us tonight. Thank you, City Council. Have Jake Chestnut, the chair of PRAB, and Matt Sickle, the vice chair, and Michael Lee, member of PRAB. We might have some PRAB members joining us online.
We have Carol Malvo and Lola Skolnick are both online.
Great. And some might jump in a little later. Not sure, but we'll keep an eye open for them. You were right. PRAB has been trying to update this master plan for many years. At one time, they even took it on themselves and tried to do it. And then they realized very quickly that this is much more of an endeavor than they can handle. So we were lucky through the ARPA fund, we were able to, through a competitive bid RFP process, we were able to contract with Mahan Reichel to take on this project. we've had this is our third community meeting. We've had two others plus a survey that was out for about a month and a half, had 581 responses. Got a lot of good feedback from the community, a lot of good feedback from staff. And tonight we wanted to make sure they're going to present some of the findings to council and have an opportunity for you guys to share your thoughts with the contractor. We have Scott Scarfone and Anthony Dye from Mahan Reichel. Scott is our project manager, and the city's project team is myself and Kevin Carpenter Driscoll back there and Terry Ruby. Kevin is the environmental coordinator and Terry is the director of planning. So we think we have a good team. We've met with Mahan Reichel, Scott and his team many times. They've come out to the park many times. So we're happy to present the findings tonight.
Hey, that's fantastic. So just to summarize, the first meeting on this took place August 17th, 2023. That was the project kickoff. There was a second public meeting on November the 15th with survey results and introducing some of the conceptual plans. And this is the third public session, so we're going to sort of get a briefing, the final concepts. Council may have some specific questions. We'll open up the floor for public comment. And the next step would actually be to finalize this plan, which would come before the city council for approval.
So after tonight, Scott and his team will take all the information back and get a draft plan together, which he'll get to staff. Staff will review it. Advisory boards will review it. Right now, we have plans to take it to, obviously, PRAB, the Advisory Planning Board, Senior Citizen Advisory Committee, Youth Advisory Committee, and any others that you would like to present it to, too. And we'll get staff reports for you and circle back with Mahan Reichel, tighten things up and get it back to you guys so it can be adopted.
Yeah, it sounds like we're talking maybe the fall.
I don't think so. No.
Probably, we're thinking maybe March-ish.
Cool. Yeah, that's great. That's great. I don't know if we'll be able to actually schedule that into the agenda, but we'll
Fine, we can work on that together.
expedite it as best we can. So let's go ahead and get started. It sounds like you've got a PowerPoint presentation.
Yep.
And we'll have that on the screen so that the public who are watching on Zoom or cable TV or Facebook or YouTube will also be able to take a look. And as we scroll through, council may interject from time to time. But I'm big on trying to kind of get through the whole presentation and kind of asking questions. So it'll be sort of a hybrid of that. Let's go ahead and dive in.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. We appreciate it. Council, thank you for having us. As mentioned earlier, my name is Scott Scarfone. I'm a associate principal with Mahan Reichel, landscape architecture firm. I'm my associate, Anthony Dye, who has done the bulk of the work of what you're going to see today in terms of graphic representation, as well as assisting with some of the design. So projects in our office are truly a collaborative effort. So there have been many people that have actually touched this, even though you're only seeing two of us this evening. So with that being said, next slide, please. So just real quick on the agenda for tonight's meeting, brief introductions, which we just had. We'll run through the presentation. I just want to clarify, Mayor, respectfully, that these are not final. These are preliminary concepts for your feedback. Once we get the feedback, we will fine-tune them again. And the next time they come and we'll present to you, it will be semi-final. And then you give us the final blessing, and then it will be final. So we're still kind of working our way through the process. But we do feel we have some solid concepts, and we're excited to present those to you today. Then we'll open it up for formal discussion, as the mayor had noted, and then we'll discuss next steps. So next slide, please. So just real quick to kind of summarize what we're trying to accomplish here is we're fundamentally trying to provide a vision and accompanying strategic plan. So this plan that we're working on for you is not just physical. We also have another consultant on our team called Pros Consulting, and they're going to work through all the financial implications of the park, not only the costs of implementing what we're proposing, but also maintenance operations and financial operations for budgeting so that you have a better feel for how to budget the maintenance and ongoing capital costs and maintenance costs for the park as it goes on. So it'll be a really comprehensive strategic plan for the future that will provide short-term and long-term goals for improvements as you phase this, because it's not going to happen all at once, how to protect existing national resources and improve maintenance practices. That is the objective of this plan. Next slide, please. So as Mayor, you described earlier, here's kind of a graphic depiction of the chart of how the process works. You see that we are here, which is today. We hope, and we're going to shoot for the final master plan sometime in March, but we're flexible on that. It certainly would be difficult to make it quicker than that, but if we need to extend the timeline to meet your objectives, we can do that as well. Next slide. That being said, I'm going to turn it over to Anthony, and he's going to talk a little bit about the community input and some of the early concepts that we presented in the last presentation.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, City Council, for having us. Just wanted to quickly say that I'm very grateful to be here tonight. I approached Scott with a desire to work on this project because when I was in school training to become a landscape architect, I learned a lot about Greenbelt, did some projects about Greenbelt. It's a city I love, so it's an honor to work on this project and share what we're working on with you guys here tonight. We can move on to the next slide. So Greg mentioned the community input process, which has consisted of a couple meetings so far and an online survey. We're just going to recap some of that really quickly. What you see on screen right now is an exercise that we took in the first public meeting where we asked participants to put their likes, which are blue in this graphic, and dislikes in orange, just to get a sense for which spaces people liked and disliked in the park. We can move on to the next slide. We also really like these word cloud exercises when soliciting input from the public. You can see that the responses that were given most often are the largest on screen. So clearly people appreciate the walking path, wildlife, the lake, the trail, all the natural resources that the park has to offer. We can move on. We also asked what some guiding principles people were looking for as we move forward with this master plan. We see a lot of things like accessibility, safety, biodiversity, respect for the park as it exists right now. And we're taking all of that into consideration as like the core tenets of this master plan exercise. So we can move forward. We also asked what was currently missing from the park, and we see lots of things like seating, signage and wayfinding, more accessible surfaces. And we're thinking about all that stuff as we prepared the graphics and the concept designs that we're going to share with you tonight. So we can move on to the next slide, which is a recap of the online survey results. We don't have to go through every one of these, but the online survey, as was mentioned, was available for around a month. It was available in English and Spanish online. And what we saw in the survey reinforced the input that we received from the public during the meetings that we've had so far. So we can keep going. So now we're going to move on to some graphics. This is an overview of the park, and we can move on to the next slide, which is an analysis diagram where we took a look at circulation and entrances in the park. What you see here is a hierarchy of paths. The thicker dashed paths are what we identified as main paths, all the way down to some of the smaller paths that are represented by thinner line work on this drawing. And likewise, we saw major and minor entrances. This analysis really informed a lot of the concepts that we're going to share with you tonight. It helped us focus in on some key areas that we think are ripe for improvement in the park. And it helped us identify some paths that could be improved and maybe even some paths that are informal right now that could be made into official formalized paths in Buddy Attick Park. We can move on to the next slide.
And I'll just add to that, Anthony, that not only did that slide help inform us, but also the dot exercise informed us, because really it was the public layered on top of our analysis that identified where the key areas were where we really needed to focus on. And so it was between those two sort of diagrams that really honed in on what we're going to present to you this evening. The other last thing that I'll say is, we work with a lot of the public, and sometimes we get feedback from public that's literally all over the map. And I will say that for the most part, we had a lot of very consistent input from the community that really helped guide the decisions that we made and recommendations that we're going to put forth to you. So it really is us responding to what we heard, layered on top of what we see professionally of what's out there. So it has to be a combination of both. Next slides. Next slide, please.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so the first graphic we wanted to share about what we're proposing is some adjustments and some additions to the circulation and pathways that we see in the park. We'll zoom in on some of these areas later in the presentation, but we just wanted to give a high-level overview of the fact that, you know, we've identified spaces associated with major entrances that we think could benefit from some improvements to the circulation. And you can see the dashed lines here where we saw pathways that people were using that were not official, that we would like to make official if people are already using them. That's the best form of public input we can get, and wanted to address some of those uses.
The other, please.
Just so, on the path on the south side of the lake there, I see the dotted line and then I see a solid line. Is the solid line the existing path or what is that?
Solid lines are proposed lines. The dashed lines are the existing.
Okay, dash is the existing.
Right.
Okay.
The other things that we were considering as we looked at these path layouts is there's some erosion going on out there. So realigning some of the pathways, even though you get to the same point A to point B, but it might just take you a little longer or a little slightly different direction. We wanted to eliminate some of those erosion areas. So that drove some of the path placements. Also, some of the areas that maybe weren't being accessed to the park, particularly the area below the dam, we wanted to make that accessible. So potentially adding a pathway down there. But also an area, there's a picnic grove sort of up on the hill, right side of the main lawn, making that better accessible and providing that as accessible area. So that drove some of the decisions to put pathways as well. Next slide, please.
So Scott is going to take the slide after this, but we just wanted to talk about 3 areas that we saw as the key areas we were interested in improving. There's the main entrance at the top left of this graphic near the parking lot. A lot of people drive in and use that entrance after they park their cars there. We also identified the peninsula to the right of that, which seems to be a key entrance for people who live in the older part of Greenbelt and access the park on foot. And the South Cove is an area that we saw a lot of the orange dots, a lot of sort of desire to be improved in that area. There's a lot of standing water, maybe some mosquito issues and some unsightly dead vegetation. So we wanted to improve that area, and it's also a key entrance for people who live in neighborhoods to the south of the park. And other than those 3 areas, we also want to propose some improvements along the waterfront edges. And these will include modifications and improvements to trails, seating, waterfront vegetation, and we want to suggest some of those improvements throughout. So, Scott, I think you can take.
Yep, thank you. Next slide. So the first area that we're going to speak about is the main entrance improvements, which is associated with the parking lot, and really, I would consider sort of the heart of the park. Next slide, please. Okay, so a number of things that are going on here, and I guess I'll start with the entrance in the upper left-hand corner, which is coming off of the parking lot. So currently, there is a proposal out on the table, and Greg, correct me if I misspeak or add to this, for replacement of the existing playground equipment that is out there currently, as well as replacement of the existing swing set. And I think that you have a contractor locked in and a style of equipment already selected and procured, correct?
That's correct.
Right.
That came before council and approved probably about a month or so ago. Yes.
And so fortunately, we're in a position where we have the opportunity to make sure that it fits in with what we're planning now. So we basically had those plans and we understood the equipment was there, but what in this plan, we're recommending that the location of that be reevaluated to more fall in line with what we're proposing here at the master plan. It's the same equipment. We just kind of rearranged it and relocated it so it fits in better with where we're proposing this master plan to be. So sort of the bluish area there is what you see. So essentially what we're trying to do is provide a cluster of activities so that this playground is located a little closer to the parking lot. It's located closer to the restrooms, and it's closer to the basketball courts. So we kind of have a hub right at the entrance of where all the active, if you will, activities happen. It also provides a lot closer, I had the kid thing, and, playgrounds close to bathrooms are good things. So it puts us a little closer to the bathroom there and just makes that entrance have a little better feel. So the existing basketball court would remain. The swing set would be further down where it was currently proposed and currently is. Those are just sort of replacement swings. Then the big thing that you're going to see there is sort of a rearrangement of the pathway systems. And addition to new pathway systems. So on the left-hand side of the slide, the south side, there is no pathway that comes around that loop. On the right-hand side, on the east side, that pathway is going to be reconfigured because right now the pathway that exists runs right smack down the hill. And what that basically does is allow the water to just run, channelize right down that path. So we're basically taking this opportunity to create a shape, a circle, which is going to enclose that central space or that heart space and just give a little more organization to that space. On the south end, we wanted to provide more activities immediately associated with the water, but also relocate the stage or the amphitheater. So we're proposing that the current location of the stage, what do you currently call it now? A stage, pavilion,
Stage,
amphitheater.
amphitheater, we call it all kinds of things.
Yeah, so we're proposing to relocate that and become the central focal element of this space, but we're proposing not to have a band shell around it because that would block the view to the lake. So it would just be simply a small stage where, intimate performances could happen, but now it's centered on the lawn so everybody could, be centered looking down to the stage. Immediately behind that, we would have what we're calling a waterfront promenade so that there would actually be seating along that back trail and individuals can face the lake and sit with nice views to the water. Yes, sir, you had a question. That's your preference, and I would defer to the mayor on that one.
It's about 4 or 5 more slides.
Every time you say something, I got a question, but I don't.
Yeah,
I don't really want to interrupt, but
I think it
don't
makes
wanna
more sense
forget
to
my
talk about it when we're
question
seeing
either.
the slide.
Well, I would prefer to present the whole concept, and then maybe we can, then before we change the slides, I'll pass it back to you to ask questions rather than nitpick. How's that sound?
It's good to hear.
So there would be a waterfront promenade that would be 2 separate paths, and then a fishing pier that would jut out into the water because we heard some people say that they'd like opportunities to fish. That edge would then be treated a little better from a planting standpoint to make it a little more sustainable. One of the things that we want to talk about as well is to try and minimize the maintenance regime. There's a lot of turf that's being mowed out there that we feel is unnecessarily being mowed. That's also a cost. It's an environmental issue. So we're proposing that new pollinator meadows be established. So to the west of the dam, that lower area, we're proposing all be converted into a pollinator meadow that would be mowed once a year. There would also be a new loop path that would be created down in that lower area that would connect up on the other side of the dam. The area immediately to the east of the circle, you see that kind of goes up on the hill into the woodland area there. There's currently some picnic tables that are up there now. We're proposing to formalize those a little more, have some pathways that make it a little more accessible, add a variety of different kind of picnicking opportunities. We know there's a large picnicking component that utilize this park, but we don't feel that there's enough picnicking opportunities there to accommodate everybody. So there would be a variety of shelters up there, picnic tables, and then one larger shelter. So that way you have the opportunity to accommodate different groups, different size groups of people who want to picnic. Those would also be rental opportunities, which would drive some revenue for the park. So that's the predominant area of the plan. I'm glad to answer any questions about this. Yes, sir.
Mr. Roberts, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Well, the path there, the paths, they look awful wide. And I have my biggest problem with the lake is, as it is right now, is because I remember the lake when it had a small path going around. It was like a path we have in the forest preserve now. That's how far I go back. I'm pretty old.
Sure.
But but now, I mean, especially the path along the north edge, I mean, it's like 20 feet wide or something. I mean, you can literally drive a tractor trailer around the lake, except for the bridge going across. The bridge is what, 6 feet or something, and the rest of the trail is just huge now and very compacted, and that's the problem. But are these gravel paths? Are you proposing paving or?
So you have a
It looks
couple.
like a lot of paths.
So you have a couple questions there.
And I'll
first-
tell you, I'm totally against any paving of paths. I think if you're going to do that, you're just destroying the park because
Okay.
you're taking the nature away from it. So anyway, that's my question. What are the paths? How are they being proposed? How wide? All that kind of stuff.
So right now, these pathways that were shown on this plan are roughly about 6 feet, 6 to 7 feet on this drawing. We have not proposed a surface material at the moment. However, we do feel that the gravel pathways is a maintenance and an accessibility issue. We've had a large amount of constituency that have identified that the paths aren't accessible. And there's also a lot of evidence out there that suggests that the erosion is creating problems with the gravel going into the lake and erosion, which is also creating maintenance issues. So I think the surfacing of the pathways is to be determined, but we certainly are well aware of all of the negative issues that those pathways out there that are creating in their current surface material.
We don't have sufficient buffering along the paths.
But we're going
you
to
know.
get to some of those issues
So
in later
that's
slides.
the problem.
Yeah.
It's not, and plus the roads are too big. They're too wide. I mean, it's just ridiculous. We're riding trucks around there all the time, and we don't need to drive trucks around the lake. You can maintain that space without driving big trucks around it.
Okay.
So we don't need, paths that wide, in my opinion. I mean, if you want to,
Yep.
if you want to respect, I think what even you said, a lot of people like about the lake is the nature there. And so if you're going to go paving the paths or making them wider or even leaving them as wide as they are now, you're doing a disservice to the people that like to go there, I think.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. We got a couple more questions from council. There's more slides. Also, I want to pull in Prab to see, if you've already looked at this and have some comments, what we're seeing. Mayor Pro Tem,
I think
then,
Jenny had her hand up first.
well, thank you. I'm the mayor, so,
I
I'll just
defer to-
recognize.
I defer to Ms.
Yeah,
Pompey.
Ms.
because I
Pompey,
believe
please
her
go
hand
ahead.
was up first.
Okay. I just have some questions about the plantings. Have you guys thought at all about what you're going to be planting there? Will you be focusing on, native plants? We have a problem with invasives, particularly, all over Greenbelt, but particularly at our lake. So I'm just wondering about that for like the pollinator meadow and for what you're calling the promenade area.
So right now, this is a conceptual level. It's a conceptual master plan. We haven't gotten to the level where we're actually selecting plant species. But I think as part of this, we would recommend that the majority of the plants that are out there be native. So that's probably what will be recommended in the master plan, but we will not be going down to specifying specific plants at the master planning level.
Okay, and do any of these, I see you have a lot of existing trees on here. Are there any proposals to cut any of the trees or alter them in any way?
At the moment, we are not proposing cutting any trees unless it's a dead or dying tree or a tree that is proposing a hazard along the pathways that we were proposing.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I think improving the flow of this. I noticed, for example, at the 4th of July, when you're walking around, like there's not a path on that, what shows on the left side here. And so if you're trying to, get up that direction, you kind of have to weave through where people had their blankets out and stuff. So I appreciate that. And I think surface is something that has definitely come up. And I know I recognize that Mr. Roberts has a certain historic perspective for having lived in Greenbelt so long, but I think we understand accessibility different and allowing people to enjoy the environment in a way. And clearly that came out in the public comment, the accessibility. So I appreciate you looking at that and thinking about the surfaces. I think the other thing that's true is the maintenance issues, because that seems like a big problem. If it gets all rutted, if things are eroding, that means somebody who has mobility challenges doesn't feel safe walking on the path. And I would prioritize making it accessible to more people, because the truth is, if people want to go out into the woods and have a natural experience, we have how many acres of forest preserve that have much more rugged trails. And I think this, at least for me, just to counterbalance Mr. Roberts' perspective, I would like to see us make this more accessible. Not that it has to be 20-foot wide paths, but 6 feet wide seems reasonable. And I don't love asphalt, but I think there might be some other paving type options that would still have sort of a natural feel, but allow people who at this point may not have the ability to go out and enjoy nature at all in the park, be able to and get out there. So that's just, so I appreciate that. And I think the other thing just I wanted to ask about, because right now, correct me, there's no picnic shelters at all right now. It's all the tables are under the trees, right? Or well, there's the small ones, but there's not a big picnic.
Small individual.
But there's not a big picnic structure
There is
right
not
now.
a big structure, no.
Because I think one of the problems that we've had is people moving because if there's not shades, moving the picnic tables around so that they're in the shade. And it seems like proposing at least one big structure with the tables, maybe we'd have fewer problems of people moving the tables around.
Stop that practice.
We're actually not proposing any picnic tables in this large central lawn.
Right, no, I'm looking at, sorry, I
Right.
shifted my, I was looking at the picnic structure area off to the right, like G and H on this map.
Ms. Pope.
Yeah, I think I go frequently. I go almost, if I can every day. And the surface can be tricky, right? Especially when there's like different weather and so there's an issue. But asphalt, of course, would not be one of my choices, quite honestly. But what I wanted to ask, when we're starting to plant, when that phase comes, are we involving then Brian Townsend and our Public Works
Yes, yes.
input on, on plants and brushes and whatever else you have in mind at that time?
Greg and Brian are collaborating on all the projects that affect Public Works.
Councilmember McKinney.
Two questions. First is, in looking at the pathways, it seemed like on some of the comments that came out in the public comment, public safety was one of the key issues. So looking at the width and what's going and being planted, I'm assuming you're ensuring that there's still visibility to ensure that people can be safe. Like, how are you going to try to make sure that it's not too wooded so that we can't be safe? How do you take that into
Sure.
account?
So again, we're still at the high level master planning where we're presenting concepts. We haven't really gotten into any detailed planting plans at the moment. We're not really proposing a lot of plants here, just some accent plants in certain way. And again, they will be presented in a conceptual manner. So when you actually go to implement the plans to construction documents, all of those details would be refined. But we would be proposing accent plantings in certain areas, but certainly we're sensitive to visibility and abstracting views and making sort of secluding hiding places. We don't want to create those. In terms of the wooded area, I mean, the wooded area is obviously wooded. So, that's going to be an existing condition that has a different set of challenges to it.
And then my second question was, based on the conversation we had, I don't even remember what work session it was, with some of the proposals for the composting and the recycling area, does any of that kind of overlap with some of the plans for the park in this area?
They do not.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a couple of just questions, basically a couple of context questions. And just first, kind of circling back to the methodology a little bit, your 581 responses, Spanish and English. How many of those responses how many were in Spanish or other languages?
Do you know that?
Yeah, I think it was about 12% were Spanish. And then it dropped off to maybe 5 down to 3% in other languages. And I think that information is actually in your packet.
Right. No, I didn't see it when maybe I overlooked it.
I'll dig it up while you
So,
were talking.
and just in terms of with staff, the park rangers are coming through the park all the time. So, were they able to provide very much input? Because some of their observations may have varied a little bit with some of the impressions and responses that came in on the questionnaire. So, how were you able to integrate what the park rangers actually see day to day? Because they're out there when it's really busy, and they're out there when it's not busy. They're out there in the rain and
Yep.
the snow.
Park rangers are part of the process. They were involved in the other 2 community meetings. Park ranger manager Patrick Mullen met with Scott and his team and a few other of his other younger staff also met and shared some of their experiences.
Unless I missed something, I didn't hear any significant safety issues that.
No, it's not really about
Understood.
safety, but more so about their observations because they are out there all
Sure.
the time. And when there's a large event, and some of the results with the public input, just I think point in time. It's one thing when you're out there during the day on a weekend. And It's
Sure.
a different thing if you're there in the morning, very early, and it's another thing if you're there on the 4th of July. So I mean, it's
We absolutely wanted their input into this plan.
So just a couple more. So looking at the diagram there, there's the picture, but that photograph, that's old, I think. So in terms of incorporating the new design of the parking lot, where the view and the access points are a little different. This map here, this is a little old, right? It's not a current. It's not
The
not a
aerial
current picture.
photograph does not show the new parking lot because it doesn't exist.
Exactly. Yeah,
So
that's what I was
Google Earth
driving at,
only
yeah.
captures so many periods of time. But it does. Okay, then we'll have to
You mean the project
that we understand the project. We've been there many times, but I'm saying Google Earth does not have the
Takes
most
them a couple of
current.
months. Right.
Right. So those entrances that you see there are representative of the actual entrances that are out there now. Even though the new parking lot isn't graphically depicted as what's out there now, that's the latest aerial photograph that we were able to get from Google. So
And we did do our best to try, and you can't see
It's and I was kind of asking that because with the tree canopy, especially the trees that are between the parking lot and the park are different now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, thank you for that. We did try, it's hard to see in this photograph because it's dark, but we did try to sketch in the entrances, the semicircular areas at the edge of the parking lot. We're sensitive to the fact that that's a recent project and we want to include that in what we're showing here.
and we have that on our GIS file. It just is represented different here graphically.
So it looks pretty good. I'm a little concerned about shifting the picnic areas on the east, how that would actually play out and how that would affect utilization. The idea of not having any picnic tables in the center part, the center circle, and also the idea of shifting the stage and or bandstand or whatever you want to call it in the backdrop. So, but I want to hear more, and I'm definitely open. Ms. Niesel, did you have any impressions before we go back and circle around again?
No, I'm still digesting everything. Thank you.
The other thing to point out that we're trying to do with this, if you notice that when you come in on the main path to the left, which comes by the restrooms, there's sort of a center line, an axis line that's created in that space. So we're really trying to focus this space and give some organization to it. Right now, it's an incredibly disorganized space. So by having this circular pathway, having it centered on the new stage, which would not be a big structure, it would just be simply a small, low-key plaza because you don't use it all that often. So we don't want to draw a ton of attention to it. It's on axes with the fishing pier, so it really starts to give order and organization to the space, and just makes it feel a little more designed but still natural.
Totally get that, but the topography is very different. We're looking at it looks like it's a flat circle, but actually it's like a hill. Okay, let's circle around again, Mr. Roberts and Mayor Pro Tem.
And we do have a
Mr.
lot more
Roberts,
slides to go through, so we'll take as many comments as you want.
Yeah, well, I have a comment, believe it or not. First, the bandstand thing. I think if you don't have something behind it, it's not going to be any good to play because you're not going to get any acoustics. It's just all the sound's going to go behind you and beside you. I think to have a sound, you have to have a background. So, and some people like to play there, but I mean, you're right. Not, it's not that often, but when they, maybe we could make some kind of, temporary backstop or something they could put up when they play or something like that. But
So for
just
the fourth,
having a,
yeah.
just having a platform out there is not going to be, I don't think it's going to be any good for playing music.
And for the 4th of July, we actually were able to get a bandstand shell to put on to help project
Okay.
sound, and
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
actually looking at that and a sound system to use in the park that would
Okay,
be more
okay.
functional. So we're well aware of that, but
That would be
Right.
something that we would encourage, because fundamentally, for the number of times that you use this, creating an obstructive element that basically blocks the view would not be something that we'd recommend. And as Greg said, and I'm an avid concert attender. I go to many concerts.
Second question is, are you, with the plantings, are you considering doing any plantings on the edge of the lake? The kind of trees there's some small trees that beavers like to eat. We do have some beavers. And to tell you the truth, I think we've kind of overdone it with the net, with the fencing around the trees. You go out and you look at that, it's really not very attractive. And the fact is, the beavers like to eat certain types of trees and smaller trees. They don't want to eat, big old oak trees. So if we did, some targeted plantings in certain areas where small trees could grow up, we wouldn't have to have net, things around all the trees. And the beavers could make a living, because beavers naturally are not going to defoliate their habitat anyway. So they're not going to go up in the woods and cut down all the trees or something. So if we're doing planting, we should be doing it for the wildlife. And the beavers are some of the main wildlife in the park. A lot of people like it, and I like it. and when you have beavers, you have more birds and everything else, waterfowl, all that is created by beavers. So we want to keep the beavers and give them some food to eat. So, like I say, if we're going to plant, let's plant for them.
Thank you.
Okay, got a couple more comments from council. I believe Ms. Pope was first, and then Mayor Pro Tem. And I do want to just, with Prab, if you have some observations, because basically we're just making some observations on these initial slides. And when you finish, there's a lot more, about 10 more slides?
A lot more.
Okay, we'll pause again at some point and take some public questions unless they are informational. So please, Ms. Pope.
Thank you. Yeah, just real quick. I do want to throw in a pitch for public safety. And I think the Public Safety Advisory Committee would be a good partner in that as well, because as you know, we have some mile markers around the lake. They're numbered, and that was for safety purposes. So in case somebody trip and fall, or something else happens, you can say, "Oh, I just passed the mile marker 5," and then first responders would kind of know where are you around the lake. Because a lot of times when you're on, people just don't, well, I'm over there by that, it's very difficult to find somebody. So I want to keep that in mind, that we maybe integrate something like that. I know lighting is always a tricky subject, and I don't want the park or the lake to be lit up, quite honestly. But sometimes, in the fall, late fall, early winter time, it gets dark very early. And so sometimes like 4:30, 5 o'clock at dusk, you kind of want to try maybe to go take another run or something, and you can't because there's absolutely no lighting. So just to keep that in mind, if you thought about, any kind of low lighting or something that can even shut off at 8 p.m. or at some certain time. I just wanted to give a pitch for that. But I think public safety we don't have a lot of issues at the lake. That's true. We're very fortunate not to have, problems, but we do have to be proactive and think about it, because we're not immune to things like
Sure.
that.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, my question maybe mostly for Greg is thinking about the playground project, and if this is proposed in a different place than we had originally thought, does that have any implications for the schedule of that project moving forward, if we're not going to be able to approve this as a master plan until March or after?
it does not, and it will not increase the cost either. We looked into both of those issues.
That's
Thank you.
excellent.
Question. Thank you.
Well, let's keep going and look at a few more slides. I don't really have a sense of just how many slides you've got.
My recommendation would be is that you let us go through the presentation with all due respect, and then we can field questions. There's a lot of general comments that are being listed so far, not relevant to each slide. So I think if we went through the presentation, then we can field questions.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So I ask the public and everybody to beg your indulgence. Let's just go through the presentation. I'm very interested in hearing what Prab feels and initial recommendations or feelings. Let's go.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next slide. Next slide. So here we have some images that generally represent some of the concepts that we were presenting. If you could slide it up just a hair or get it to be full. There you go. Thank you. These are just some images that show kind of some of the ideas that were presented on the previous slide. Top left, you see potentially what a sort of low-key stage might look like if it was more than, say, a plaza. An example of how we might plant some of the edges along the lake to get them to feel a little more naturalized. What a potential pavilion might look like. We're suggesting that the architecture of the pavilions that happen out there are a little more refined, a little more durable. I know right now currently you're building some of those pavilions in-house with your existing crew, and they certainly aren't bad, but we're suggesting maybe we elevate that a little further. The bottom two slides on the left shows potentially what that pollinator meadow might look like. I know some of staff is real excited about the progress they've been making with the small pollinator meadow. We think that could be expanded dramatically, increase the wildlife benefit, but also reduce some of the maintenance costs. The middle slide there, which the words are partly covering, show potentially some of the ideas that might happen down on that promenade edge that I was suggesting. Thank you. So theirs might be what a little fishing pier might look like and how that promenade might sort of jet around and come off of the main path, what that might feel like. And there's an example on the right. I don't want to get too far down on the path, no pun intended, but we do think the surfacing is an issue, and this is just an example of what a typical park might be surfaced as. Next slide, please. So from there, we're going to move down to the, thank you, South Cove area and discuss that. Next slide, please. So here we think there's an opportunity to sort of more formalize this space. Right now, there was an attempt some years back to create a set of stairs that kind of go down to the water. They're pretty disheveled shape right now. I don't know how exactly safe they are. There actually is a hazard there. But also that lawn area, it just doesn't have a tidy feel to it. In fact, it's a little sort of intimidating, feels kind of messy. As Anthony mentioned, some of the community has mentioned some of the mosquito issues in that area, just generally having an unsafe feel to it. So we think there's a lot that can be done there with a little. We think if just some of those wooded areas along the edges were cleaned up, maybe there was a newer band of trees that was planted on the inside there, maybe a low hedgerow that just sort of formalized and closed in that space as you see right there, and then maybe a pavilion added to that. We think that would actually be a great opportunity to have a smaller gathering spot or picnic area, particularly for residents that enter the park down on this side. That would give them close space to hang out on their side. We also think that the area in between the path and the lake could be refined significantly to give people a better opportunity to get down and access the water. So there would be a series of steps as well as an ADA accessible route to get down to the water. And so you see some of the images on the right that present ideas that maybe what a small plaza space or seating space might be down adjacent to the water, which would be lower from the path. What some of the materials that might be. There's a pattern that's established out there now with some sort of the rocks that have been placed. We like that. It maintains the natural sort of feel, but we think that could be formalized a little more. So you're still giving the natural materials, but you're kind of doing it in a way that is a little more organized, if you will. So some of these images show how the rocks can be used in that fashion. And lastly, the two wet areas that are out there now, we know that there's a drainage issue. We know that the one area, the drainage patterns have changed and it's holding water and it's not draining freely. It wasn't part of our master plan assignment to evaluate exactly why that's happening. So one of the recommendations that we will make is that further study happens down in this corner for the way that the water is moving and being held. And that area just be cleaned up. Some of the dead snags that are down there be removed. Some of the vegetation be limbed up and cleaned up just to tidy it up a little bit and make it feel a little safer and a little more organized. So that's what we're doing for this area. Next slide, please. So this area, we're going to talk about the peninsula improvements. Next slide. Thank you. So this area really is about two main areas with a connector in between. So there's the area to the right, which is really the intersection. We know that this is a place, every time I've been there, there's been tons of people that are always just gathered in this spot, particularly in the summer, looking at the turtles and just looking down over the water. So it really is sort of a junction. And we felt that that space needs to be formalized a little more, that junction needs to be recognized as a junction and a gathering and a holding place, if you will, as people, and give different opportunities for that. So the convergence of the pathways would be formalized to more of like a small plaza space. There would be seating areas that would be around the plaza space because, again, we know that this is a gathering space, but we're also suggesting a boardwalk overlook that actually goes out into the lake. Right now you have the railings and just people gather on it. It's not exactly safe. So we want to kind of tidy that up and give people the opportunity to get out over the water, to look down onto the turtles. We think that would be a great spot for kids and for people in general. And then the peninsula itself is a really pretty spectacular space, to actually go out into the water and be surrounded to the water and feel like you're really sort of out in the lake. So we want to formalize that a little more, but yet in an informal way. Again, we're staying with this theme where we're using the natural materials, the rocks, and these kind of rock seating areas. You can see some of the images that we have there. So when you get out to the point, we want to create sort of three separate kind of seating areas that are all be in the general spot. So one of the seating areas would be on the, let's see, is that north? Can't remember. Yeah, plan north is true north. So north, there would be a seating area which would be sort of semi-secluded. So by that I mean it would still be open and visible and safe, but it would feel like when you're down in there, it's kind of your space, and people would know that it's okay. There's like 3 or 4 people down there. That's kind of their space. I'm going to go to the other side. So there would be a same space created on the south side. So it would get people close to the water, give them a little seating space, and then there would be a space immediately right on the point. So we would really sort of carve that space up into some smaller sort of semi-private areas and really make it be more of a destination feeling than it is now. So I'm really excited about that space. And then again, some of the images just convey what that might look like. Next slide, please. Here we're going to talk about the trail along the south side. We feel that needs the most amount of work for a number of reasons. Next slide, please. So this diagram identifies different segments of the trail. There's a couple things going on here. One is there's some erosion happening in the trail, and that's due to the runoff from the south side from some of the residential properties. It's a pretty steep grade. So there are definitely areas that we've identified in the blue where we feel there are drainage issues. And by that I mean the drainage is basically coming off, running across the pathway, creating ruts, but also pushing all of the existing gravel down into and creating a plume in the lake. So there are definitely erosion issues being caused with that gravel surfacing. The other thing we've observed is there's actually some informal seating areas that are out there now. There's been rocks that have been placed, and we know that people like those. But they do feel rather, they could be tidied up a little bit. They could be formalized. They could be cleaned up so we don't have erosion issues, so there's safer access to get down to that. But we still want to maintain that vernacular of that rocky, kind of naturalistic kind of feel. But we want to make it a little safer to get down there and just feel like it's a little tighter. We want to formalize it. Right now, there's a feeling that people can basically get down to the water anywhere. And in doing that, they create erosion issues. They trample on plants. There's a safety issue. So there's a number of different issues. So we feel that by addressing that and creating more formalized seating areas, that would encourage people to kind of utilize the spaces that were designated at and discourage people from just kind of randomly going down to wherever they want. Now, will that prevent people from doing? No, but it will certainly psychologically encourage us. And it
That's the people who are fishing.
understood.
They're going to go down next to the water.
Understood.
Going all the way around the lake.
Yes.
So you can't formalize them.
No, no, sir, we can't. But we're going to try and formalize enough of them to encourage them to go into those spaces. And I'm a fisherman too. I appreciate that comment.
Fishermen are not going to go where you formal.
Next slide, please. So this shows an example of a slide where we're going to try and sort of formalize the path a little more, and by that we're going to look to create some rock edging that will prevent that path from growing wider over the years as the maintenance activities continue to happen. It will also encourage people to stay on the path more frequently, even as the gentleman said, people are going to do what people are going to do, but there are things that we can do to encourage activities. It's also going to prevent some of the erosion from the lower side of the path and from that pathway sloughing off. There are instances where it's actually dangerous because if you're not paying attention to where you're walking, your ankle could slip and roll on that one edge. So we want to try and minimize those instances. And by having a rock border like you're seeing here, we can prevent that from happening. Next slide, please. To try and manage the water and erosion issues, we actually need to deal with it. So we need to identify where the low points are on the high side of that trail. We need to capture that water in some kind of inlet and provide a drain underneath of the path and allow that water to go directly into the lake. That'll prevent erosion on that path and minimize the maintenance issue, but also prevent gravel and gravel plumes from going out into the lake edge. So there's two images there that show kind of how some of those small drainage issues can be addressed. They really are small drainage issues, but when there's a heavy downstorm, it kind of becomes a major issue. So it's not that it happens all the time, but when it does happen, it's significant. Next slide. And this section just shows what one of those more formalized areas would be. So we would identify 5 or 6 or 7 areas along that pathway where we would formalize sort of this pedestrian pullout, if you will. So this would be an area where we would encourage formally people to get down to the water's edge and sit on these rocks. So it would be sort of a designated sort of seating spot where we would encourage people to actively engage in. Next slide, please. Everybody's favorite subject, surfacing material. It's our professional opinion that the material that's out there now is problematic for a number of reasons. So we do feel that there needs to be an alternative surface material that is considered. Right now, we're presenting 3 options. One is a more formalized compacted stone dust that actually has a binder in it that allows the gravel to stay more solid. It has its maintenance challenges at times, but it's less maintenance than what's out there now. And the surface is more stable and more accessible to handicapped individuals and strollers, things of the such. Asphalt is absolutely an option. I know that people say they don't like it. I don't want to get into a debate tonight. My job is to present to you the options that are most commonly used in parks around the country and the rationale behind it. This is incredibly low maintenance. It provides an incredibly stable surface, and there are different materials that can be used and colors that can be used for asphalt surfacing to make it feel like it's not black. In fact, we can get this in a number of different colors. And then there's porous asphalt, which would obviously, what it says, it allows the water to drain through. Just so we're clear, what's out there now is not porous, even though it's gravel. Water sheds and runs off of that surface. So the porous asphalt would allow the water to run through the asphalt paving surface. It would also provide a very stable surface with minimal maintenance. The porous asphalt, I will say, comes in about 25 different colors. So there's a lot of different options that we have in terms of the color schemes there. So these are the options. And that concludes my presentation, our presentation today. So we'd be glad to address any questions that Mayor you have or council might have. And thank you for allowing us to present to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Just quickly, I'll just lead off with that last slide. So perhaps in your presentation, you've spoken quite a bit about trying to formalize some of the areas around the lake and in the park, the areas that are heavily utilized. So as far as the paving, stone dust or asphalt, perhaps that's something that could be done just in some of these areas that you're talking that would be formalized, and the rest could remain natural, just sort of having a
Absolutely.
balance there. So let's I'm wondering, Prab, do you have some initial observations or thoughts about what's been presented? Have you already seen this presentation? Okay, I'd really like to get some feedback from you, just as far as your impressions before we actually dive into council comments. Why don't you go ahead?
Sure. Generally speaking, for me, I feel like we've kind of hit that balance between the natural area and understanding that since the original master plan was developed, that use has changed. And so I feel like it's kind of a common sense. We're looking at moving the different activities into a more defined location. When you're talking about the actual planning of it, it does feel a little more cohesive, a little more intentional. I will defer to my colleagues for the more technical approach. But as far as the trail materials, I do think that accessibility is something that we've heard from the community and we've talked about with Prab. So I do think it would benefit from a longer conversation to see what kind of accessible options we could have as far as access throughout the park and not just in certain areas.
So you got this presentation on the concepts last month or something. You had one meeting where perhaps kind of talked about this.
We were able to talk about it. We received this presentation in between meetings, so we have not met as a group to review it.
Okay. So why don't you go ahead and share a few of your impressions, if you have some additional impressions to share.
Sure. Matt Sickle, proud to be the third landscape architect at the table. Professionally, this is very satisfying for me. So I really appreciate the work that goes into creating this kind of document, because that's something I do too. The increased organization, the character of the amenities that you're proposing, I think are consistent with the character of the park and with what the public has asked at all the meetings that we've had so far. I'm wondering, I do have a couple questions. For the ring path around the heart of the park, are you able to achieve an accessible grade down to the fishing pier by increasing the length of the paths with that ring?
So we have not actually analyzed the slopes of those pathways yet. That would be something that we can look into. I could tell you that it's probably going to be difficult on the west side to achieve that. We might be able to get it on the east side, but we have not actually looked at the grades to evaluate what the slopes are of those pathways.
Okay. It would be my hope that a shorter loop like that, or that series of loops, would be able to be an accessible path that, at least on one side, if not the whole ring, could be a way that people, either without the time or physical ability to walk the whole lake loop, might be able to have a shorter lake reaching experience on a path like that.
We could look at that. My gut reaction tells me there's a lot of grade to pick up, and it's going to probably be hard to do that at 5%.
Mine too, and
So-
I'm wondering if we could fudge on the perfection of the circle a little and get more accessibility.
We could look at that.
If that would be possible.
We could look at that.
For things like, I'm really thrilled to be at a meeting with planting questions. I do wonder if you could provide guidelines without doing the actual planting plan,
Yes,
species
absolutely.
selection, and for the
Yes.
safety standards too. If there was like a minimum mow strip or something along the side of the standard path.
Yes.
That seems within the scope of a
Yes,
typical
sir.
park master plan.
Yes.
And then last, I'll just speak, in favor of really any of the three suggested path materials. I've got experience using them all. The stone dust with a binder gives a really satisfying gravelly crunch, while allowing, some more stability than just the loose gravel that we've got out there now. The porous asphalt, is that like a flexi pave or is that yeah, so that's pretty great stuff too. The district uses that a lot in tree preservation situations where they need to provide more stability and paving over the roots of an existing tree that they don't want to kill. So all good options.
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to circle around and have some extensive comments, I think. One thing, just stepping back a little bit. So this master plan embodies broad concepts, but at the same time specifies maintenance and what I'm really driving at is in approving a master plan, it's something we'd be living with for the next 10, 15 years. So all of the proposals that you've put forward are not things that would happen overnight, particularly, in talking about stabilizing the runoff erosion around trails. So those are objectives that would be, have engineering, they'd have to be engineered and worked out over time. So that's something that might be phased in over 3 years, and it might actually be broken down to different sections. So I just want to put that out there before we begin our extensive comments, because this isn't something that we approve it. This is how it's going to be. This is going to happen in the next year or two. These are broad concepts, a vision that we're actually codifying and trying to sort of break down into steps and things that we can live with. And some of them, like with this plan from 1992, things have evolved over time. So it's kind of hard to have discussions like this because we're kind of approaching it, the broad vision, kind of breaking it down into bite-sized chunks that we can work with over time as our budget and our abilities to actually public works and contractors to actually build some of these things. Those are constraints that we'd be dealing with over time. So
Mayor, just to add to that, it is very typical of park master plans that we do, and we do a lot of them for communities such as yourselves, that it is a grand vision. It's a roadmap to the future, and they are phased in over time. And they're phased in over time based on funding. Funding is either achieved through capital expenditures or grants. I have parks that I did a master plan for 10 years ago, and they're only 3/4 of the way completed because they have decided that they're only going to implement that through grants. So there's a number of different funding mechanisms. There's communities that provide support. So yes, this is a grand vision that will be picked apart in pieces. And one of the great examples is the playground. Even though that the playground was, procured prior to the master plan, right? It's one component on this master plan that now you understand how that fits in to the greater whole. So as you make improvements a little bit at a time, you're not doing something that you realize 5 years down the road, oh, wow, why did we do that? Or how's that going to fit in? Or everything's cohesively knit together.
Right. That's very helpful. And I'm trying to think of the best way to kind of, have this discussion. Perhaps it's actually to break it down into pieces as you present it. First, we talked about the central area and the circular path.
Circle back to slides if you'd like, or we could take general comments, however you would like to proceed.
What's council's will? Do you want to talk about this all at once, or do you want to break it down into different sections?
I want to ask a couple questions, what I want to do.
It might be more organized if we sort of are,
Broke it into little chunks.
and helpful for the audience as well. That way they can, because they are going to come up and talk about one thing at a time, so.
Okay, but to make sure that all of council has an opportunity to proceed the way that they would like, let's initially just take some broad questions from council. If you have a couple of questions about the presentation or statements that you'd like to make before we move into specifics in the different areas of discussion, I think that would be a good way to proceed. Were you first, or was Mr. Roberts first?
I have a question to the asphalt, the porous asphalt. Is it a solid? I can't imagine how it works. That's why. So the asphalt path is just a regular path, which I really don't like that in our park. Porous asphalt, is it just more looser, or is it?
So
Is it the same as in the parking lot? That's porous asphalt.
There are portions of the circular entranceways in between the paving bands that are porous. It's the size of the particles, and it's the amount of compaction that they're put together. they're laid down in such a way that it allows water to migrate through the particles. So in other words, the particles aren't completely adjacent to one another. There's gaps in between them. So they're put close enough together to make it a safe, solid surface to work on, but they're far enough apart to allow the water to migrate through the individual aggregates. And it's very common used. In fact, the National Park Service uses it in many of their parks.
I think I saw it in Rocky Mountain National Park at the alluvial fan when I was there last summer, and that's what I was going to ask, but it sounds like maybe that is what I saw.
And more parks and botanical gardens are migrating to that pathway for sustainability reasons.
Yeah, I just never heard of it, so I'm very intrigued
Sure.
by that. I want to touch it and see what it
So we're going to go to Mr. Roberts, but as far as the path, the surface, I think it's important that we keep in mind the so many runners. People love to jog, to walk, but also runners, and so having a surface that is conducive to that, something that's kind of easier on the knees, is something that's important. And I don't know if the stone with the binder is as flexible of a surface for runners as what we have down there now, which is just basically gravel. But,
It would
the
be
runners
generally the
love
same density, but it would be more stable.
stable, so it would be a little bit harder on the knees.
Well, it would be safer because it wouldn't move on you.
Your ankle.
Yeah.
Which is a problem for the cyclist, just that stable surface, and you have to be on a hybrid, or you can't really be on a mountain bike. You can't really be on that path on a road bike. Mr. Roberts, go ahead.
Yeah, road bike would be a little rough. But I have three things. One is the path. I mean, I hope we don't do paving, because before we did the last master plan in 1992, there was a big discussion, and people, soundly did not want to pave the lake park. I can understand having an area up by the, around in that circle area there, where there's some hard surface for handicap access or whatever. You have to do that, but to pave all the paths around the lake, you're talking about maintenance costs. That would be way more maintenance costs, because when you do have to fix it, it's a lot more money. It's a lot of money. So I like the fine stone dust stuff. I mean, that would be, I think, a decent surface, and it's not paving, at least. But maybe there's something better than that. I don't know. Maybe we need to look more. But my other issue is this thing down on the in the forebay there, near the peninsula, where you're having something out into the forebay. What is that, a dock or something out there? Well, and you're saying people are going to get closer to the turtles. All you're doing is infringing on the turtles. You're infringing on that whole area. And not only that, that area has to get cleaned out once in a while. They dredge it, try to keep it. So if you put stuff in there, now you got to take that out, to do any maintenance in there. And that's a lot more money. And it's a lot more money to maintain a structure in the water. So you were saying that you're looking at costs and stuff. All that is a future cost for people. That stuff doesn't last forever. In fact, it doesn't last very long out in the elements like that. So that's another issue. And then there's the peninsula, where it looks like you're virtually paving the whole thing over. I mean, you've got paths on paths. I don't see where that's, making it better. We can strike a balance between access and paving materials, but I mean, look at it. Look at the picture you got. There's like a path, from side to side.
We looked at it.
Is that what, that's not what I want to see at the lake. And I don't think that's what most people that go to the lake want to see.
Okay.
I can see having one path go out to the end and then let people go where they want to go, because that's what they're going to do anyway. Just putting a bunch of paths around there, that's more money. That's more maintenance. And I don't think it's what people really expect at the lake. And I don't think that's what people want to see. At least not the people I know that walk there. But so that's three of my big issues.
Thank you.
I think we need a lot more investigation into, surfaces for the trails and where it's appropriate to have a more solid surface and a less solid surface. And, hopefully we can make the trails, the road around the lake, narrower. I mean, if you're going to do the whole thing that's out there now, that's a little bit much. So I think we can focus on making it, a little more accessible, but also, not so intrusive into the natural areas around the
Yeah, I
lake.
like the idea of narrowing the trails. We can certainly look into that. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So we got a couple of comments from the public online. I'd really like to kind of circle back and just talk about each piece of this, so it's a little bit easier for people to follow and comment on. One point that Mr. Roberts just brought up, though, is with the forebay, the Turtle Pond forebay. So that forebay was actually dredged for us by the county through the Clean Water Partnership, and we have a 30-year maintenance agreement with them to maintain that area. So we would have to figure out, if we were to do something like that, we would have to figure out a way to work with the county so that we can maintain that maintenance agreement in place, because that saves the city a whole lot of money. And also it was done to improve the water quality there of the lake as a whole. So, Mayor Pro Tem, you have something to say?
Well,
I'd like
yeah.
to kind of go back to some of the slides. Go
Yeah,
ahead,
no,
please.
it's about the trail, the paving materials, because it sounds like I could go to the park and pay more attention to some of some of that pervious asphalt, porous asphalt there. But can you indicate a good place where I can go look at that? We could look at the compact stone dust, that other example, or you mentioned also maybe some different colors of asphalt, just so that we can actually get an example. If you know of some areas in this area that we could go and look at what they look like, I think that'd be helpful.
We could follow up to this meeting and give you a link to a vendor's website that shows the different colors that are available. In terms of
It'd be great to be able to go like someplace that's using it and see it in situ.
And I'm sure there's probably someplace in Montgomery County or Prince
I would
George's
think
County
so.
or
I'm not.
DC.
I can't think of
Right?
anything off the top of my head.
Granite rep.
What's that?
Well, actually, that's true. I guess the vendor probably knows where they've installed it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could
Yeah.
we could get that for you.
I think that's better than seeing the pictures. I think it's
Yeah.
easier to picture it if you can actually go and
Sure.
stand in front of it and look down at it. And then in terms of cost, is the porous asphalt, is that a lot more expensive? I assume it's more expensive than regular.
I'm not prepared to
Yeah.
answer the cost at the moment.
But do you know? Yeah,
Um,
okay.
But I would say it's a little more expensive
bit
than
more
the
expensive.
asphalt. Yeah, but
Okay.
also I think in terms of costs, I think the thing you need to remember are life cycle costs.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Okay, so is that cost to install that initially going to cost a lot of money? Yeah, it is. But guess what? This guy doesn't have to send a truck down there, a couple times a year to fill in the ruts. You don't have to fix the washout all the time. It's a life cycle cost, and this is why you do a master plan, to think about the long-term life cycle costs of what this is. So yes, we're sensitive to costs, but we're also sensitive to the costs 10, 15 years down the road, and they're called life cycle costs, and that's the things that we want to help you sort out.
That sounds good.
Okay, so we're going to go through the section by section. After we get a comment by Ms. Pompey, and I'm going to take a comment from Ms. Davis as well. Please go ahead.
Just on the issue of the porous asphalt, asphalt is like one of the most recycled materials that can be used for paving, correct? Like it's just recycled. That's just how they make it.
It can be recycled. I'm not 100%. I couldn't say for certain that the porous pavement is recycled, because it's all about the size of the aggregate. And when you use recycled aggregates, there are usually a lot of dust and stuff that's in it. So I don't know that we can get recycled material for porous asphalt, but it is considered a sustainable solution because of the drainage.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to promote Miss
She can speak.
Miss Davis. Are you there?
Yes, I am.
Great. Are you back in the 49? Or are you still out in Hawaii?
I am, and I would have been there tonight, but unfortunately, on the airline coming home, I managed to get a cold.
No. Okay, please go ahead.
Excuse me. First of all, I have been at a park where there was the permeable or porous asphalt, not only was it porous so that rainwater would go through it, it was softer. It actually was more flexible. And I think that we have some playgrounds in Greenbelt. They're not porous asphalt, but they have that soft feel to it. Also, I'm a little bit concerned, and maybe some other Greenbelters might be as well, when we start using terms such as formalized, organized, we need to tidy it up, it's too messy. That's what a park is. This is not an English garden. This is not something that you would see in the middle of DC. This has had a nature component to it. So I hope that we don't keep using those particular terms. It's just kind of puts me off. As far as the path size, I hope that you do make them narrower, because if you make them wide and you have paved them in some way, you're going to have more problems with bikes, scooters, and other electric vehicles, some of the other things that can go around the lake at very, very fast speeds. So I'm hoping that you're thinking of the safety. The good things that you mentioned, I'm very happy to say that the more seating areas, whether they're rocks or benches or whatever thing, I think that's what people really want, especially near the lake. And there are drainage issues, and I definitely agree with you there. And I like the plan that you have to deal with that. And you may need to work with the lakefront owners. A lot of those owners have developed their own paths, which have led to some of that drainage issue. And we also have encroachment. I mean, we've had some complaints about things being so close to the path that they've kind of blocked or caused some kind of injury. There are other things I'd like to talk about later, but definitely the idea of making a circular path around the whole entrance, that could be a permeable porous pavement, because that's the most used. But I'll come back with other things later. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Hey, let's so circle back in the slides perhaps to so that we can speak and the public can speak about the individual proposals more coherently. So I think the first slides had to do with the central area. And I know a couple of members, I know Mr. Hartman's had his hand up for a while. Did you have some general comment, or wouldn't it be more convenient to actually speak on individual aspects? Okay, well, why don't you go ahead, please?
Michael Hartman, 2 Court Garden Way. First of all, I really appreciate your emphasis on accessibility for people with disabilities. And I would suggest, you've mentioned the National Park Service. They've been doing this for over 50 years now, in finding creative ways to make natural areas accessible but still natural. I think that when you're thinking about accessibility, it's not just a few things. It's you're looking at how people with disabilities arrive at Buddy Attick Park, the accessible pathways to the functional areas and the areas themselves, but it's also the distance from the parking lot or those areas. So if things are very far away or difficult to get to, let's say if they're uphill, for example, that could cause barriers to people. And just accessibility for people with disabilities is not just for people with disabilities, as you know. Parents with strollers, people pulling little red wagons, carts, and things of that nature. As far as the surface is concerned, there are many, many ways of having accessible and porous surfaces that I'm sure you can look at and see. But just a side comment, that asphalt actually is a byproduct. It uses byproducts of petroleum. And so if people are concerned about petroleum and oil, that a lot of one of the ingredients is petroleum product. So just general comment about that. Yeah. Okay, and the concept for accessibility is universal design, which you're looking at, which I appreciate. Universal design lets everybody use it. One of the things about the pathways is that the pathways should be pathways that are used by people with and without disabilities both, so that if people need an accessible pathway and they're with a companion, that they both use the same pathway. It's not a separate way of getting there. And that's important too. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, as I've said, I'd really like to kind of go and talk about the three specific areas. So let's go back and take a look at Area 1, which is the circle area at the entryway to the park. So it's Area A. Area B is the south area, is the peninsula, and the third area is the south area. So let's talk about Area A first. Okay, yeah, and Mr. Hartman was just talking a little bit about access to the park from the parking lot. A great deal of thought and time was put into conceptualizing the plan for the parking lot. So I wonder, there was a lot of thought also into the sight line. So at the top area from the parking lot, it's flat, so people with a mobility issue can still kind of get out and see the lake from there. So for me, the stage, which I like the concept that you showed of what the performance area would look like, but I'd still be inclined to sort of keep it off to the side a little bit so that people who are not able to come down because of the topography or whatnot would still be able to see the lake from the parking lot, or from the sidewalk, which is flat and very accessible up top. I like the expanded meadows for pollinators or just natural areas. And I do like the circle concept. I'm a little unclear or not so persuaded about expanding the picnic area further back. And it's just a little hard to visualize. Do you have some sort of a visualization of how that might look?
We don't, and there actually are picnic tables up there now. We're just sort of, I guess I'm not using the word tidying up anymore, but we're,
Don't use formalized.
yeah, we're making it more universally accessible.
There you go. There you go. So that was just a couple of thoughts. Other thoughts from council or from the public about this part? We'll start off with council. Member Pro Tem?
Yeah, I guess just briefly, I think the idea was, although one of those images had a structure around the stage, but I think the basic concept here was it would basically be a flat surface, and then
Correct.
we could get a temporary thing. So on a
Correct.
day-to-day basis, it would not block the views of the lake at all. It would only be put up something for special events.
Correct.
which
So
are-
only when you have your special events 2 times a year, 3 times a year, however you decide to program that space.
Yeah, and just to elaborate, glob onto that a little bit, maybe not temporary, but some sort of a modular system that would be permanent, but somehow we could bring it up.
Not there all the time.
But not there all the time. So not temporary necessarily, because I really think there could be some additional programming. There'd be more concerts and theater and different things there in the park. Story time.
Systems exist, and there are different ways to accommodate that, whether the town would want to invest in purchasing that themselves, or they have a relationship with the vendor. So when they have special events, they come up and set up and tear down the stages. There's a number of different ways to do that for concerts, and it really depends on the type of concert that you have. If you have a small acoustical jam out there with 2 or 3 people, you don't need all of that. So it really depends on the type of performance that you want to have and how elaborate you want to do that.
And that makes the space more flexible.
Correct.
Yeah.
Councilmember Niesel.
Hey, thank you. I wonder if you could tell me a little bit why you've chosen to move all of the picnic tables over to the east side. I share Mr. Hartman's concerns that people dragging, coolers and such might have trouble, one, seeing it. We're still working on our signage, so obviously that would be a learning curve for us. And then also, what do you or have you thought of how the center could be used? Because right now I see a space where currently there are some picnic tables and picnicking happening. And now, as you've planned it, I see that being kind of a dead area. Can you speak to those concerns, please?
Sure. So a couple things. So first of all, this is a proposal of what we're recommending currently. We can certainly make adjustments to that. So if the group or the community feels that picnic tables need to be located in different locations, we can make alternative recommendations as to where we could do that. One of the things we don't see a space as being dead necessarily or alive. We see them having different purposes. Just because there aren't picnic tables in here doesn't mean that people can't picnic in this area. One of the times I was out there, I did observe people bringing blankets and having picnics on blankets. The challenge of having picnic tables just kind of scattered around is that they create issues with wearing out the lawn. And so you have areas where lawn gets wore out, and then you have erosion issues, you have bare earth, you have things like that. You have trash, even though I will say that the maintenance group does a good job of picking up the trash. So we just feel that this area would be better left sort of open and natural. And again, I hate to say the word clean, but it would provide a nice, fair, open view to the lake. And we're consolidating a picnic to an area that can be maintained better. So that's the reason. But that doesn't mean that we couldn't create picnic areas in this general area. If we would do that, we would probably want to more formalize, hate to say that word, but I have to, formalize that area. And by that, I would mean we would want to cluster the picnic tables so maybe they were under wood chips and not out in the lawn area, so we prevent some of those erosion and wear issues.
Okay, Mr. Roberts.
So the inside the circle there where it's kind of yellowish, is that proposed to be meadow or
Those would
something?
be pollinator meadows.
Okay, so you wouldn't be mowing that but once a year or whatever?
Correct.
But no, I have another question. But it's down on the other side of the lake there near Lakeside Drive.
We're going to flip there. Yeah.
You're going to come to that? Okay, I have something for there when you get there. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Pope.
Yeah, so I like the circle that you proposed, and I think having a pervious surface there and a circle would make sense, just like Jay Davis mentioned. I also wouldn't mind having the picnic area in a little separate place, because I think you have a lot more tree canopy over there. I think it's just a little bit off the path. You don't have people walking through your stuff. And like you said, we do have a lot of issues with people moving these heavy tables all over the place. So that is an issue. So I kind of like this idea. And I like your fishing pier down there as well.
Councilmember McKinney.
I'll wait till some of the other places.
Pompey.
Do you envision? I'm just thinking back to some of the photos that you showed us. Do you envision having any seating, like formal seating, near the stage, like benches in front of it? You know what I mean, like a.
Yes, if you look at item number M, that pathway there would have seating all along the edge of it. So we would call that a promenade. So there would be multiple benches along that path.
Seating.
Not continuous, but there could be 7, 8, 9 benches along that rung,
Okay, I was envisioning.
and they would
that,
all
but I
face
appreciate
the
that.
lake. So it would be sort of seating that faces the lake.
But no seating that actually faces the stage.
No seating that faces the stage. The stage, though we do envision, would have a small seat wall around it to sort of contain the stage. So that would in itself function as seating. So it would be a low sort of seat wall that would enclose that space.
Sit on the lawn.
People could sit on the lawn for sure.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
So, and just two more things. I totally get the line, the symmetry. With the fishing pier, I said maybe the stage or performance area could stay a little bit closer to the east. And likewise, I think the fishing pier area, I'd like to see that instead of being a straight line, the sight line from the parking lot, I'd like to see that maybe a little bit further to the west, closer to the west. And also, I want to ask Mr. Varda, so the idea of clustering, organizing the inclusive playground and near the beside the restrooms and the basketball courts. I know the basketball courts can be a lively place. Sometimes, there's a lot of activity. So, are you comfortable with that idea, or were you thinking that were you intentional in the thought of having some separation between the basketball courts and the inclusive playground?
No, we're comfortable with that idea. We like having the more active part of the park up in that corner, and the more passive part of the park on the other side. So it's not, it's not all over the park. So if you want a quieter area of the park, you can move away from the active part of the park. Yeah.
Okay, let's take some questions from the public. Mr. Schachter, did you have a comment?
Leon Schachter, 9B Parkway. The park was absolutely beautiful to look at and walk around, but I see very little use of it in or on the water other than fishing. So is there a possibility of having access for small boats like kayaks and rowboats or sailfish for the public? I do see kayak access sort of for private homes along there, but no way for the public to engage in any of those activities. I don't know if the lake is big enough for that, or I would think it'd be desirable.
So you sort of with the south area. I think you were proposing a space down there where you might be able to launch a kayak. I know there's a couple of people that are out there in kayaks every day. But
So we have not proposed a formal kayak launch. There's different ways to do that in terms of a pier or a structure that allows you to do that. We have not proposed that. There's certainly nothing in this plan that would prevent anybody from kayaking the way they're currently kayaking. We're not formalizing it. In that, I mean, is, it's someone has to carry a kayak to get down to the lake a significant way. So you have to be pretty hardy to be able to get your kayak down to the lake currently. There's no way to get a vehicle. We're not proposing roads to get down to that. So I think if the kayaking is currently happening now, we're not preventing that from happening, nor are we proposing to formalize that.
okay, let's take a couple more questions specifically about this area that's on the screen right now, the main body, the central area of the park. We'll next talk a little bit about the peninsula and then about the south area. Sir, did you have a comment about the slide, our current topic?
New Orleans resident, no, I do not. My comment relates to the proposal as in total. First, when I was a kid, it was not Buddy Attick Lake Park. Buddy Attick was very much alive and may well have resented the lake being named after him and appended the park after it. It was just the lake. Me and my dog and friends of mine every summer day would go to the lake and play. And my dog, bless him, would still be jumping in the lake after that rubber baseball if he could. Of course, he can't anymore. And I might not be able to throw the ball into the lake anymore. But it was a beautiful lake then. It's a fine lake park now. I understand that I may not be happy about it, but I understand the need to program open space, particularly as it relates to something Mr. Harbin brought up, and it's close to my interests, and that is making the park and its trails completely, as much as is possible to do, accessible to all. I think the idea of narrower trails is a fine idea, but to the extent that there are trails, they should be open to people who use various mobility assisting devices. There is a Disabled Recreation Association. I don't recall precisely its name, but if the consultants could reach out to it, I've read some ideas they've had over the years that maybe they're more accommodating than I am, but would accommodate their needs and desires to the general interests of the public enjoying not wild space or even natural space any longer, but community open space. So that's a suggestion if you do it. Years ago, I read, and I've never been told that it doesn't exist, and I don't remember the details, but there's a way of treating dirt. Of course, these trails, there are roots growing out and as has been suggested, rocks spilling down and all kinds of things. But a trail, there's a way of treating the dirt on the trail that doesn't require certainly paving, and it doesn't necessarily even require porous paving, certainly not asphalt, but it's probably a little more expensive because it requires continuous maintenance. But I'm just wondering if you know anything about that and if you could consider that as a possibility for the trails. Again, there is the problem with roots and things erupting from those trails, but if you could pursue those two ideas, I certainly would be happy at your next presentation to council. Thank you.
Okay, it looks like former Councilmember Davis has a comment on this part of the discussion. I'll go ahead and.
She can speak.
Jay Davis, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm hoping you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay. I have a question about the path below the dam. Is that going to be allowed?
We don't see any reason that would prevent it. We had discussions with staff last week about this. We, of course, will double check that, but I don't see any reason why it would not be allowed.
Okay. Second, it would be good if in the area where it says F, on the left-hand side, where it's near the playground, I could see a couple of picnic tables going there because, you know, the families come and the kids are playing, and then you got the picnic table close by. And maybe just some thinking about, you know, maybe some other areas. I know there's some other picnic shelters that are along the lake on the north side, and I hope that you keep those. Are you planning to have any kind of information kiosks?
We have not discussed that with staff at this point. I know there's an information kiosk out there right now, which is on the plan but not labeled. It's the little white box immediately to the south of the restrooms. We're not planning on removing that.
We are looking at having an information kiosk. Terry and I have been talking about that. We're kind of waiting the completion of the master plan to replace the one that's there now.
Right. And I think that we need one that's actually closer to the parking lot because a lot of people come for the first time and they have no idea what is even here at the lake. And then we have two other entrances, so there should be some smaller information kiosks down there as well. That's just a suggestion.
Like a map.
The stage, I'm not pleased where the stage is, and I'll say why. Because I'm thinking, I don't know how many of council lately have gone down to the lake area for 4th of July. The concert band needs a band shell. And yes, you can get some temporary ones because they had one last year. But the problem is you can't take it down. And so you're blocking, for many people, the fireworks. And that would also be the problem with the meadows that you have, the pollinator meadows. A very great idea to have them. But the pollinator meadow on the left-hand side is prime viewing area. And when you have hundreds and hundreds of people, they're going to go into that meadow and they're going to trample it and put their blankets and their tents and everything else there for the 4th of July. So we do have to think about some of our major events, even our Easter egg hunt and so forth and so on. So the stage perhaps could be moved closer to the right-hand side so that you're not blocking the view of the lake itself. I have a problem with the fishing pier, and there may be a safety issue there. I'm sure that will be taken care of. Let's see if there's anything else here that I need to mention before we go to something else. And I think that's, I hope we don't think about lighting. I mean, I know that it gets dark, but that's what nature does. It gets dark. And a lot of people can actually walk with the moon or whatever. You can walk those paths. I've walked paths at night and it's not a problem. However, I probably would be a little more careful now with my advanced age. But if nothing else, they could bring a flashlight. Many people bring flashlights when they come for the fireworks so that they can wend their way home. And it's kind of pretty to see that. So I hope that we don't put light poles up just so that we can see in the night.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Let's see. Let's go and focus in on the peninsula area. Put the slide up for the. Well, let's just pause there. If you could roll back just for a second at the concept. Yeah. So that stage thing looks pretty cool, the way that it's open in the back. And I think there's some sort of a system that we can probably invest in that would be permanent, but would be collapsible somehow so that you'd be able to see through it. You did make that suggestion about the more permanent, using a more standard kind of a shelter thing on the right. That's a pavilion, a small pavilion or a mid-sized pavilion, I guess. Is that what that is?
Right.
Okay. So if you could scroll down to the slide that focuses in on the peninsula.
I think the south area comes next.
The south area? Okay, let's look at the south area then. Whatever comes next. Okay, right there. So the south area, I like the concept that you have there. I like the cascading steps kind of leading down that could serve as a small gathering area for a small meeting, like a tiny amphitheater. And also that's something that would sort of react to the water level. Where I'm from originally, Cincinnati, Ohio, they sort of have a serpentine wall system that cascades down to the river. And it's great because you can get right down there by the river, but when the water's high, it sort of naturally just comes up. So I like the concept there and the landscaping. I'm not sure what we can really do about Area G where the drainage is a problem. Ms. Pope, you walk down there all the time because that's probably where you enter the park. Do you have some thoughts about what they've proposed?
I like the idea. I think it would look really beautiful. Like you said, it cascades down. I think it's nice. And there's a lot of people that stop at that area as well.
Right. Now, I think one of the challenges is it's very, very close to the homeowners right there. So I think as we discuss this, we'll have to certainly get their feedback and buy-in to what's being proposed. And, definitely we want to keep the area as natural as possible. That's one area, though, where some sort of a really low-level light or something might be kind of helpful. I don't know. I don't have strong feelings about that, but that's just a thought off the top of my head. Councilmember McKinney.
This might be a question more for Mr. Varda, for if part of the planning is around putting in this pavilion, and I'm assuming there's some more formal programming that would go in there, what is the thought around keeping it open sometimes and then having the rental, or would it only be like a rental?
I think that staff, we need to circle back and talk about that pavilion. I see some potential issues that might cause, so we want to circle back and have a conversation with Scott about it. So yeah.
Thank you.
And I would just say the intent of that was actually not to be a rental. The intent of it would just be a covered, sheltered space where people could seek refuge or get out of the sun, or maybe have informal picnics, just, a small gathering space like you would see in other types of parks. So we didn't see this as being programmed or rented. But as Greg said, we need to talk about that more with staff.
Councilmember Pompey.
Have you figured at all into the master plan, the entrances to the lake on the south side? Because there's some accessibility issues with there's like a path, a steep path, and then there's some stairs that are very much not ADA compliant. So I'm just wondering if that is included in your master plan or not.
So we have not specifically looked at each entrance point that comes into the park. Some of those, as my understanding, are not technically part of the park. They're actually on private property. Some of them are. So we have not looked at them up to this point.
Okay, well, I mean, I'm pretty sure the paths coming from Maplewood and Olivewood are public, though. Those are not on private property.
There are a couple that are public and there are some that are private, so we need to take a better look at that.
Councilman Roberts.
Well, I think the problem with this site, with that pavilion there, I think if you, number one, I mean, personally, I think that the forebay there should be this area should be more like a wetland area that takes off of the forebay, because we have that forebay there. And the forebay really is not big enough to do what it needs to do. So I think that would be a wonderful wetland area. We could have we could have a more natural flow into the lake instead of having that concrete spillway coming out. We could make it more like a natural stream coming into the lake out of the wetland area that would be fed by the forebay, and then maybe have like a little bridge across it. And you could still have, seats down there and stuff like that, but it would be a more natural area. But I think the problem, if you put a structure in there, I think at night you're going to have, kids down there doing stuff all the time. I think that's going to be a big problem, for the people that live there. The kids, like from the apartment buildings up there, they're going to be down there doing stuff. And the people up there ain't going to like it, and our police are going to have a nightmare trying to deal with that. So I think that area is best left undeveloped, and like I say, more of a wetland area. And yet make it that way we can get cleaner water going into the lake, because that's there's only two main places where the water comes into the lake. It's here and over on the other side, where the peninsula is. That's where all the water comes into the lake. So we need to make it better here, because now it's just a small forebay and concrete pipe going in there. So we could really improve the water quality if we improve that inlet. And like I say, if you put something there, it's going to be a problem, with police and everything.
Thank you.
I know that. I grew up here.
Hey, I actually agree about staff sort of circling back and thinking through the pavilion or the covering structure. But as far as the amphitheater kind of concept, like in the bottom right-hand corner, I really like that. I think that it sort of still provides a semi-natural place where you can sit and talk and gather. And I just like the way that looks. I think it would fit in quite well. Councilmember Niesel?
Yeah, I would just also like to register my concerns about formalizing, if you will, any of this area much at all. I know that olive wood and maple wood they get very, very jammed they're just small little courts, and they already get overwhelmed with people parking there to access the lake. And I fear that putting in any additional structures would only exacerbate that situation.
Thank you.
Sorry, Ms. Pompey, did you have a comment? Okay. Ms. Pompey?
Yeah, I do have to agree on the pavilion. Prime location for a pavilion that could potentially create issues. I know there is a lot of the wetland, like that you mentioned, that water that keeps seeping onto this big open area. We need to take a look at, because that is a problem, and I've mentioned that many times, especially when we have heavy rains. The entire area gets just flooded, and we just had several trees there come down as well, because it's not a safe spot. The cascading steps I do like, because a lot of people sit there and read or study or do something. So I do like that. But we need to take a closer look at this area. But we do have to keep in mind the parking situation, like it was just mentioned, because Lakecrest Drive as well, and we have Lakecrest Drive, we have a lot of the apartments and condos. That's the only way they can park, and the people live there. So if we add anything structural there and picnic areas, that would create, I think, a bigger burden on Lakecrest Drive.
Okay, any comments from the public here? I see
yeah,
Jay
Ms. Davis
Davis'
has her
hand
hand
up. Anybody in the room have a comment? Okay, let's pivot. Jay Davis, are you there?
Yeah, still there.
Okay, please go ahead.
I do agree with Mr. Roberts about the pavilion. It's going to be an attractive nuisance. And we do know that it has happened in other parts, for instance, over in Greenbelt East, where the Greenbrier Park was, the pavilion that was up there was an attractive nuisance, and it attracted people who were doing drugs and things like that. I mean, if we do have any kind of pavilion, it will need a camera so that we can keep an eye on it, but we're going to get complaints from the neighbors. As far as the formalized look of the trees in the circle, I think you can make that a lot softer and do better plantings and maybe put benches closer to the path. Because basically that's one of the areas where people like myself, we've gotten around the lake pretty far, but now we just want to sit for a while. So whether it's on the stone steps, which I don't think people my age might be able to get to, but some benches along on the other side, the southern side, if you want to say that, would be better. So I think making it more, I think we'll have to ask that whatever that company was that came in and did that for bay probably has to relook at it. I know they've relooked at it once already, but I think they're going to have to look at it again. And we may have to put in better plantings further closer to the path. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Hey, let's go ahead and move to the peninsula area. If you could scroll down, Ms. Lashley Mullen. There we go. There we go. Comments from, we've heard quite a few comments about the peninsula area. A little concern about Area G, that pier that goes out into the forebay that's maintained by the Clean Water Partnership. And I think it's Solterra or Soltez is the actual contractor that did the work. Council? Comments? Prab?
No comment.
Prab?
I like that deck.
Mr. Roberts?
Sorry about that. Can't help it. I mean, the lake has been a big part of my life, to tell you the truth. When I was a kid, I pretty much lived there a lot of times. It was a beautiful place. But, instead of having that intrusion into the forebay, down on the south side of the lake, way back in the day, when I was this big, there was a little pier about, it's kind of before you get around the bend where, Mark lives and, where Mark lives. Before you get to that, about a couple 100 feet, there's an area there where you see a lot of, there's a lot of blue herons and stuff that are feeding in there. At least they're there when I go down there. And at one time there was a small pier, not a big thing, but maybe it was 10 by 10 or something like that you could walk out on. And so I think that would be, a more appropriate spot because it is a spot where people like to watch wildlife and stuff. But I'm not, saying we should build some giant thing, with like that thing is, I think, way too big. But I think that is just an intrusion into that spot. And it's going to cause problems when we have to do maintenance there. But, around a little farther on the south side is where historically there was something there.
So just some commentary to the pier. This is a conceptual idea. The size of the pier can be navigated.
But no matter what you do there, it's a hill going down into the water. So that's a problem.
I understand.
And the biggest problem is you're infringing on the wildlife there. Anything you put in there, you're infringing. And I don't think that's what we really want to do.
Well, the pathways are infringing on wildlife too, but.
Well, but they've been there for 80 years. Well, 60 years.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
So I think the concept of is providing opportunities for children and people to get closer and experience the water from what I witnessed when I was out there.
Please let him finish, sir.
Please. Thank you. So I think there's different ways to navigate that in terms of the maintenance. I don't think a structure in this facility is going to impact your ability to clean this out or dredge this out. I think that can all be engineered sensitively to account for that. I've been in these situations before and have done it. So the extent at which this goes out into the water, as I mentioned, could be navigated. When you get into detailed design, the concept is maybe getting something off of the main path so that people have an opportunity to get a little closer to the water but aren't quite on the path, to give them an opportunity to have better viewing of the wildlife.
And the
So-
other thing that we should mention about why a boardwalk or a dock style structure was proposed rather than additional paving is that a boardwalk is the least intrusive option for bringing people into that space, rather than the entire footprint of that is not going to contact the water. It's going to be a couple of footings that are 6 inches by 6 inches or so.
Right.
So it's, if anything is in that space, this is the least invasive option. And we can talk about whether or not anything is in that space, but.
And there's a very nice interpretive panel there also that the Clean Water Partnership put there describing some of the wildlife. Councilmember McKinney.
I guess before we make a judgment about whether or not it is harmful or not, I think we probably have an example. So going over to Lake Artemisia, there's something like that that's in there. And so it might be worth talking to the town of Berwyn Heights to get a sense of how they clean it out, if there are any issues with their path and their boardwalk that goes over there. I don't know, but it's worth talking to a municipality or a town that actually has it to see if it works or not.
Let me see, in Berwyn Heights, or is it in College Park? It's College Park, I think, yeah.
It's maintained by the county. So, hey, could you describe the planting areas again quickly, just so that I have a clearer idea? So this is a concept. So those area BBB, this is not currently there.
Yes, so they would be low level sort of water edge plantings that help stabilize the surface, but also sort of prevent people from trying to walk right up to the water. Again, you can't prevent people from doing everything, but there are certain things that you can do that are effective in discouraging that. So they would be low level water edge plantings that would soften that edge and prevent erosion.
Okay. Yes, please go ahead.
You asked for crab.
Yeah,
Yeah,
could
you're
you?
gonna have to get closer to the microphone.
And I know Prab hasn't had a chance to form, but you guys are here, so please.
Son.
Yeah, there, when it
Thanks.
lights up red, it's on.
Thanks, Michael Lee, 126 Hedgewood, Boxwood Village. Been on Prab for over 10 years. Know there's some folks here, been here for 25 years, not as long as some of you. I'm still a youngster. But you've asked for items. I like how you broke it down. For this specific piece of the puzzle, 3 comments. I like having something out into the turtle area. When my kids were young and we went around the lake, that was a prime spot. What they wanted to do was walk under the rocks. That's a little bit of a dam that's kind of dangerous. If you give them a different opportunity, they can enjoy the turtles and not get into trouble. Second thing is that part between D and F going out into the peninsula, that gets kind of boggy. So I appreciate having a roadway there that a path. My apologies. I know I need to be very clear on my terms.
Even worse is a formal roadway.
Yeah, formal right away. But so I like that. The last area, I'm going to have to think about it a little bit. I share some of the concerns with how that's being built up. I'll have to take a walk down there and get a better idea. Those are my 3 perspectives with respect to this part of this proposal.
Okay. I was gonna ask, since I don't see any other questions, I was gonna ask staff, Kevin or Terry Ruby, to just kind of give some just impressions of all 3. But Terry, I think she's escaped. She's slipped out of the room. Is she gone? Oh man. Yeah. Go ahead.
And Lola, or Carol, especially Lola, as somebody whose name is on the first master plan here, you should raise your hand if you want to speak up. 40 years on Prab.
There you go.
So make sure raise your hand if you have something to say.
Welcome, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for putting this together, Scott and Anthony. I think you guys have done a great job bringing these concepts to everyone, so that we can take these in, digest it, and talk about them. I personally, from what I'm seeing from these concepts, there's a lot that I like, and there's a lot that we need to discuss moving forward, obviously. But there's nothing in here that I think is not insurmountable if we come together as a community and work together to figure that out.
Okay, and there's some discussion about the paving materials. Did you have any just initial off the cuff kind of impressions about?
Yeah. So one issue is that for me and the water quality aspect of having gravel path around the lake, that is a huge issue. We get a lot of erosion, and we have public works crew that's constantly putting more gravel back on top of these eroded areas, just causing more inflow into the lake. One way to solve that would to have a more permanent surface. That would be the easiest way. Porous asphalt, I think, is a great material that we can use to really address a lot of the stormwater issues that we're seeing around the lake.
Yes, my only thought with the porous asphalt is what the life is of that surface, how it would need to be maintained, and how often it would have to be
Yeah, I have
replaced.
experience with porous asphalt at some of the different places that I've worked. That does need to be maintained on a fairly regular basis, depending on its use. As a pathway, this was a parking lot, so we had snow plows and things like that to consider. But on a pathway, that is going to be a lot more of an extended time frame. It does need to be sort of vacuumed every now and then to make sure that those pores are still open, but it's not an insurmountable amount.
I guess that would happen naturally each year as we blow the leaves off the path in the fall, which is something Public Works has to do a couple of times in the fall.
Sure.
Hey, thank you. And since Director Terry Ruby left the room for a couple of
Well,
minutes,
she's back now.
I know she's back. Would you mind just coming up to the podium and just, I know that you have, planned around so many aspects of the park over the many years that you've been here. And I'm just wondering if you have a couple of general or specific thoughts about either any of the areas, A, B, or C.
No, I believe that, well, tonight was very successful in that they brought preliminary concepts to solicit input and discussions. And we got a lot of great feedback, things for us to think about, things for us developed. But like Kevin, I believe overall there is nothing, I believe, in the plan that we can address. And, we're not going to please everybody with some of our decisions. There's some very complex decisions when you're dealing with various user groups, the trail surface being one of them. One of the things I heard this evening, and I think it can be accomplished, is perhaps there's going to be various types of trail surfaces depending on the usage and the location, which if you can see at the parking lot, we've used, I believe we have 4 examples of pavers. We have the paving system impervious, we have the flexi pave there if anybody wants to go see it. And, and I could see that being utilized in some areas. It's not, I don't believe, practical to be utilized throughout the park system itself. And I understand some of the concerns about intruding in some of the natural areas in the 4 bays, but I think there's a balance there. And I think, this is, again, a vision, it's a framework. As we go to implement these things, as always, we have a lot of input, a lot of discussion, professional engineering that needs to be done. And they're developed with all the sensitivity that I think that has been discussed here this evening. But and I do think we do need to start also looking at our access points. And that's something we haven't really done in this plan. And perhaps it may not be able to be accomplished here, but it's an important thing that we will have to look for, as well as the signage aspect of it as well.
Okay, thank you so much. So as we kind of wrap things up, let's go back to Jay Davis and then Lola Skolnick, who's a member of PRAB, and actually was a member back when the 1992 master plan was approved. Let's do that. Lola was the chair in 1992. But first, let's go to Jay Davis, then we'll go to Lola. Jay, are you there?
Yeah. Just one minor aside. While I was preparing myself for my trip to Hawaii, I was walking around the lake, and a lot of the informative panels that we have are in total disrepair. They're either peeling, faded, non-existent as far as reading them. So I think that perhaps the museum, Megan, could go around and look, and planning as well, because we probably need to replace them in a fairly short time. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a problem throughout the city. Roosevelt Center and over by the community center, some of the interpretive signs are in poor poor shape. It seems like there's a lifespan of about 4 or 5 years, and I think part of it has to do with exposure to direct sunlight. Hey, Lola Skolnick, are you there?
Yes, I am. Um,
Welcome.
I just wanted to say that I am very happy to see a preliminary concept plan that is a professional assessment for a way forward, so we can plan into the future for the park as it is, as we want it to be. And I'm very happy that there will also be financial costs and budgeting and maintenance costs and budgeting as part of the concept proposals. As we get more to finalizing the details, this is something that when PRAB sought a master plan all those years ago, it was because we saw a lot of stuff happening piecemeal down at the lake, decisions being made without it being um, run by a forum such as this one. And it's really wonderful to have a professional team doing this wonderful work for our city.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for your continued service on PRAB. It's really quite admirable the amount of time and effort. And I know from the short period of maybe 4 years that I served as the liaison of PRAB, I know that revisiting and updating this master plan has been something that PRAB has wanted to do. So to the members of PRAB that are here, Jake, Mr. Chestnut, I know you'll be looking forward to working through this at your next meeting. And to MLK, the firm, did I say that right? It's
MRA.
MRA.
Mahan Reichel
Okay,
Associates.
okay. Great work, just in codifying this, the public outreach that you've done to get us to this point, the public meetings, incorporating all of that, continuing to work with staff, working with PRAB and the other advisory boards. I don't know, APB, I guess they haven't really been engaged, but they'll probably look at it along with the Senior Citizen Advisory Board, maybe Public Safety as well. But I hope that you've gotten some good feedback from talking to council. And is there anything you'd like to add as we sort of close out the work session tonight?
I'd just like to thank
Just one moment, please.
No, you please.
Oh, please, go ahead. Yeah. If you could go to the microphone, please.
My name is Jay Sumner. I live on Ridge Road. I'm not much of a public speaker, so bear with me.
Welcome.
But I'm a walker. I'm a nature lover. I'm a birder. I'm at the lake a lot. I'm a wildlife viewer. I go there for quietude. I go there for meditation. I go there for the nature. There's a lot of words I heard tonight that are very worrisome. I'll start with formalizing and tidying up, even though I know there's good humor around them. A lake path isn't meant to be formalized and tidied up. And if that's the premise we're working on, then I'm very worried. There are words that I haven't heard enough, except from maybe Council Member Rodney Roberts. I haven't heard much about wildlife. I haven't heard about the birds. I haven't heard the word nature. I haven't heard about the owl family that brought the nature photographers and the birders here for months. I didn't hear about the nesting of the green herons last summer that may not come back if there's too much asphalt or porousness or other activity. I never heard anyone say that the lake is a habitat, and that's what it is first. The lake is a habitat. There are turtles there, like Rodney Roberts has mentioned. There are birds that a couple people mentioned. Other things I heard that were disturbing, that the junction at the perimeter needs to be formalized because so many people use it. If so many people use it, maybe it's already liked the way it is. Same with the peninsula. If the children are looking, maybe they're already looking because it's a good spot and it doesn't need to be changed. Lastly, I was at the meeting in November that was to the, I'm sorry, I don't know all the committees, advisory board in November. There were birders there who voiced their concerns. I voiced my concerns. a couple other people voiced their concerns similar to mine. I was happy when one member of the board there seemed to have different thoughts, but she also agreed that maybe the plan could be looked at as two different things, and that yes, we can make the main entrance more accessible. We can make the main entrance be good for more activities and more people, but the lake trail can stay the way it is. And if the council can also consider it almost like two different plans, then I think many people would appreciate that. Lastly, with all due respect, I'm going to address something that Councilmember Weaver said. I'm sorry if I have your name incorrect. I think I heard her say that people who want nature can go into other areas of the many other acres of Greenbelt. The other areas don't have a lake. Many of us go there for the lake and the quietude and the mental health. I must say, I do hang out, have family members and friends who need areas that are accessible. And once we're already in the car, we go to Lake Artemisia, which is 5 minutes away for many Greenbelters, even closer for West Greenbelters. So please consider that we have Lake Artemisia, and please consider where Greenbelt Lake can be. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And thank you for your statement and the words that you interjected into the dialogue. So this has been an opportunity, I guess, in a way, the first formal opportunity council has had to weigh in on the concepts. And I think you've put forward some very interesting concepts. The lake is such an important part of Greenbelt's legacy going back to, I guess, 1936 as a WPA project where the lake was actually dug out by hand by WPA workers, one shovel at a time. So it's an incredible thing, and it's a really deep part of our legacy. The fact that was, made as a WPA project and serves so many different purposes.
I studied it in school.
Yeah, I studied it in school as well. So thank you for your good work, and we're looking forward to getting additional feedback from the public, from the advisory panels, and hopefully in the March, April, when we're able to, we can circle back and talk about it a little bit more and maybe approve the conceptual master plan.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We got a couple of information items. You don't have to stick around if you don't want to.
I just want to say real quick, thank you for the board and for the community for your input. I want to reassure you that we listen, but I also want to reassure you that when we deal with communities, there's a lot of passionate people that have a lot of passionate viewpoints that don't necessarily converge. And so one of the things that we work very, very, very hard to do is to thread the needle. And by that, it's to make a plan that meets as many objectives as we can, recognizing that, as I always say, in a democracy, if someone's happy, you're not doing a good job. Everybody needs to be unhappy with the final plan. That's a true democracy. So I rest assured that we will do the best we can to listen to what everybody has to say, but also we're going to make professional recommendations that sometimes go across people's opinions, because this is what we do for a living and we work on parks every day. So a lot of the issues that were brought up today are issues that we've heard before on other parts of the country and familiar with them, and there are some unique ones. And so we're going to do the best that we can to put forth a plan that meets everybody's objectives. And so we look forward to the next presentation, and we thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. Okay. Councilmember Pompey, you have a couple of information items?
Yes. I wanted to share that I participated in the National History Day competition over at Eleanor Roosevelt High School today. Just really excellent projects from these kids. I think some real winners. So, we'll see how that ends up for them. And then the other thing I just wanted to share with folks is to let you know, hold on, I got to get the information here on my phone, is that Boy Scout Troop 214 is having a chili supper on February 19th from 5 to 7 at the Elks Lodge over in Riverdale.
Mm-hmm.
So, put that on your calendars. It's their major fundraiser of the year. So, and they're sort of like housed out of Riverdale. That's the Elks
But
is their
it's a
sponsor,
Greenbelt.
but this is mostly it's
Greenbelt.
mostly Greenbelt kids. I don't have a flyer. I was gonna like bring them, and then I was like, I don't want to be too pushy about the chili cook-off, but I can. Yeah, I can.
No, I need,
That's a
I
busy
need-
day. That's
It is a busy day.
Is that Fat Tuesday?
Me,
Because I know there's a
no,
Shrove,
it's 19th. Sorry, it's the 19th. There's a meal and reel that night.
Okay. Well, I love a good bowl of chili.
But you
being
could
a
get a
native-
bowl of chili and then go to the meal and reel. So,
True. Okay. Mr. Samaran, do you have any information items?
I have one.
You have one, yes.
As I mentioned to council during the retreat that we went, well, retreat or some other date, that we wanted to schedule the tours. So we want to coordinate a schedule with council members, schedule the site visits to all of our facilities. So we don't have to get a date now, but if you could provide us some dates, we'll also send out some dates so that we can coordinate.
It's
a
for
tour.
orientation, but not just it's for council, and it's for members of the public as well if they want to tag along.
If members of the public want to tag along, we have
The
two
tour.
objectives. One is to provide a comprehensive introduction to all of our facilities. And two, we're going to be presenting projects that we have in the works, repairs and improvement projects at the numerous facilities, so that when they come to council, you're not seeing them for the first time. You would have had an opportunity to see the space and hear about some of those projects.
Hey, let me suggest that the week of the 15th, when we are not, because of President's Day and Valentine's Day, there's no council, there's no work sessions or anything scheduled. I think that week would be the optimal week to try and do that.
How much time do we need for that?
That's a little tricky because if, Greg's gone, but Rex could, talk all day about what we have going on in all the facilities, the tennis courts, the fields and all that. But we want to keep it to under 3 hours.
And actually, I think, do you mean the 15th? Do you mean the 12th to the 15th? Because President's Day is the 19th.
Oh, I'm sorry. There's no, is there a work session that Monday? Yeah,
There's
no
a work
session.
session on the 12th.
Okay, but there's nothing on Wednesday. So, yeah, and so the primary purpose, for the 3 new council members who have not really had a chance to visit necessarily. I mean, perhaps everybody has been to all of the wonderful Greenbelt facilities, and I gotta tell you, the city of Greenbelt, we actually have more facilities, more infrastructure than most other municipalities our size or throughout Prince George's County and the state. And part of it is because of our legacy in 1937 as being a WPA project. And buildings were built to provide work for people on the one hand, but also to accommodate this community that was built by the federal government, literally built from scratch. So I think it's important. So we need a little bit more information, though, as to which buildings and which amount of time, so that all of us and members of the public are also invited to come along.
So the sites that we have in mind are the Aquatics and Fitness Center, the Youth Center, the Community Center, then the Public Works Yard, and the police station.
Okay, and that tour of the Aquatic and Fitness Center, is that going to include a plunge in the hot tub?
You're welcome to jump in the hot tub and the pool.
Just asking. So let's think about that and see if we can. And the primary purpose is so that new council members can be there and talk to the staff. If you're not already thoroughly familiar, it's another chance to kind of get out. Yeah, Mayor Pro Tem.
But I assume that the idea is during the day, not, during the day.
right,
Just
during
to
the
make
day.
that clear, that
Correct.
we're not trying to replace the work session we deliberately didn't have on Valentine's Day. It's sometime during the day, maybe that week.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Hey, if there's no further discussion, let's go ahead and call it a night. Yeah, thank you, everyone, for coming, and thank you for your input and your comments on this plan, this concept, this rough draft that just came before council. So do appreciate and listen to your ideas and your thoughts. Thank you so much.